This school is known as a man's hell, where the girls wield icy blades, freely disciplining the boys. To survive here, one must learn to disguise oneself. The man is a new student just about to enroll, and from the moment he stepped through the school gates, he caught the eye of the academy's overseer, known as the Five Swords of the World. Behind the man appeared a long-haired cross-dressing boy whose terrifying appearance made him shiver, but what was even more shocking was yet to come. Not just one cross-dressing boy, but all the boys in the school wore this style. The man didn't pay much attention, assuming this was just the school's free-spirited culture. However, when he entered the classroom, he was greeted by fierce and ruthless girls determined to train this new arrival properly. The cross-dressing boy looked at the man with pity, saying everyone had gone through this. Only then did the man understand the strange realities of this campus. The masked girl leader gave the man two choices: either drop his pride and disguise himself as a girl, or leave the school. But the rebellious man refused to choose either. Immediately, the masked girl pursued him, drawing a massive 40-meter-long blade and slashing off his tie, then unleashed a perfect combo that forced the man to retreat step by step. Though battered and in trouble, he cleverly dodged all attacks. The masked girl then used her ultimate skill, the guided breath technique, which harnesses internal energy through controlled breathing to gain powerful strength, nearly chopping off the man's head. The man, unwilling to back down, attempted a spinning kick, but the masked girl anticipated it perfectly and with a backhand slash cut his cheek. Realizing her strength, the man no longer held back and pulled out his secret weapon to fight her head-on. They exchanged relentless blows, and despite the masked girl's flood-like attacks, the man stayed mostly defensive, waiting for her to catch her breath. Sure enough, in that brief moment, the man performed a smooth move, grabbing the masked girl's slim waist and channeling all his power into his arm to slam her to the ground. Even severely injured, she tried to resist, but the man pinned her down. At that moment, a fangirl came to aid, sneaking up for a surprise attack from behind. Calm down first, little sister. Something's wrong. Killing someone on campus is, no, this is an internal report. Your real name is, isn't self-introduction enough? I'm Nomura Flo. Nomura. The man is known as the school's biggest playboy, and girls dare not approach him casually. Not long ago, after pinning the masked girl down, he didn't intend to do anything but got unexpectedly hit by the pink-haired girl who came to her rescue. But what truly ruined his reputation came after. To get a permit to leave the school, he had to approach the masked girl again. However, since their kiss, the masked girl had been bedridden with a high fever, unable to recover. So the man quietly sneaked into the girl's dormitory carrying snacks. At that moment, the masked girl was venting her anger into her pillow, calling the man a pervert. But the next second, she blushed, recalling their kiss. Wow, girls' feelings can be so changeable. Suddenly, she sensed the man's arrival and returned to a serious expression, drawing her blade toward the door. But the man was no ordinary person. He took the unconventional path and jumped through the window. The once stern masked girl immediately lost her composure upon seeing the snacks. The man first praised her cute face under the mask, causing her to blush deeply, then directly asked for the outing permit. The masked girl sternly said the permit could only be granted to those with good conduct. The man obviously didn't agree, so he launched into flirtatious tactics. Just as the masked girl was about to faint from happiness, the man grabbed her collar. Unfortunately, the poor quality of the pajamas made this scene look like a pervert assaulting a helpless girl to any onlookers. The pink-haired girl couldn't bear it and triggered the alarm, chasing the man all the way to the square. Passing by, the curly-haired girl was eager for a chance to prove herself, and although she disliked the pink-haired girl, they temporarily teamed up. However, they had no coordination. The man used his Kamehameha move, quickly dispatching them, even blowing up the pink-haired girl's skirt to reveal her plump backside. The man grinned wickedly as the two girls immediately remembered what he had done to the masked girl and were so scared they cried. All the girls on campus saw this clearly, and the man's reputation was completely ruined. Meanwhile, unaware, the masked girl had already handed over the pass to the man and stamped it. But just after, news spread that the pink-haired and curly-haired girls were publicly humiliated by the man in the hall, which angered the yellow-haired senior of the Five Swords. She immediately decided to take action against the man. 4 days later, when the man came to class, he was stunned. The masked girl's attitude toward him had clearly changed from the day before, and the girls were all afraid of him. Even the cross-dressing boys hugged themselves, seemingly afraid he might attack them. Then the masked girl began to declare her dominance. That day, the man was leisurely eating snacks and studying. The cross-dressing boy warned him to be careful because the curly-haired girl he had defeated was the younger sister of the yellow-haired senior, and his enemies were more than that. They included the female emperor, who was even stronger than the Five Swords. This female emperor was fierce. When the masked girl and yellow-haired senior attacked simultaneously, the man just smiled lightly and easily defeated both. More importantly, she was a stunning beauty with an amazing figure and face. The man suddenly stopped smiling when he read his photo magazine because only one person had such power, the boy who had once defeated her, who was actually the cross-dressing female emperor. This complicated things. It seemed the road to building a harem would be bumpy. The next morning, the masked girl came early. The male lead rushed out of his room in such a hurry that he forgot to wear one of his pants, all because because of yesterday's chaos, where he accidentally scared 2 girls into tears, earning him the nickname of Princess among the female students. Even though the masked girl later realized it was all a misunderstanding, in order to calm the students and protect the male lead, she declared she would personally monitor his every move. At that moment, the blonde sisters arrived to settle the score, but the masked girl quickly declared her dominance, saying, "He's my little brother, outsiders stay out of it." The blonde wasn't pleased, accusing her of trying to keep him to herself and reminding everyone that the boy had bullied her little sister. Since the misunderstanding couldn't be resolved, the masked girl told the blonde to leave so she could talk with her sister alone. The blonde then ordered her little sister to go teach the boy a lesson. The sister followed him everywhere, whipping her leather whip non-stop, but the male lead swiftly pulled out his belt and entangled her whip with it. Just as he was about to end the fight, remember, he had only worn 1 pair of pants that day, poor little curly-haired girl ended up completely overwhelmed under the weight of the male lead's grenade trousers. Meanwhile, the school's goddess Tianyu was quietly admiring the scenery, her calm demeanor revealing the insight of a seasoned powerhouse. The male lead also noticed the Empress, who looked strikingly like the person who had once beaten him to a pulp. After exchanging a few words, he became more convinced and decided to approach her, but just then the angry blonde shouted, calling him a pervert. When he turned around, the Empress had vanished. In truth, this beautiful, fair-skinned, long-legged Empress had already been defeated and captured by the male lead before, though her pride wouldn't let her admit it. On the other side, chaos erupted as the blonde started fighting the male lead. Although his special gloves were great at deflecting slashes, they weren't very effective against a Western rapier, and he had no experience fighting that style, making the battle even harder. The blonde planned to wear him down until he collapsed. Realizing how serious things were, the male lead went all in and charged at her. She thrust her blade at his abdomen without hesitation, but he smiled. He had secretly placed a blood needle on his body earlier that morning to evade inspection, and it ended up blocking the deadly attack. As she tried to retreat, he smacked her on the head, then unleashed his signature move, Magic Bullet, ending the battle. Defeated, the blonde shouted, "I'd rather die than be your slave. I know you'll punish me in horrible ways, but please, be gentle." The male lead replied that he wasn't interested and turned to read his study materials. Deep down, as a woman, she was shaken. This pervert had kissed the masked girl, seen 2 girls' underwear, and yet had no interest in her at all. Was she not attractive enough? No way. She blushed, stuffed her seal between her chest, and told him he'd need it on his permit if he wanted to move freely through campus. Faced with such a beneficial situation, even the morally upright male lead was tempted, but thanks to his willpower, he resisted. Impressed that he could resist her charm, the blonde began to see him in a new light. Suddenly, the masked girl arrived and, seeing the male lead seemingly up to no good again, immediately tried to chop him down. After clearing the misunderstanding, the blonde gave him her seal but proudly declared she'd also help reform him. Feeling threatened, the masked girl began arguing with the blonde over who held the main wife position. Because the male lead had defeated both of them, they both clung to him constantly. It annoyed him, but with the occasional perks, he tolerated it. That's when the golden-haired girl, one of the 5 swords, returned from vacation in Hawaii and saw the male lead flirting with both girls on the rooftop. She lost it. This was supposed to be a reform, yet both girls had turned into part of his harem. Furious, she called for a 5 swords meeting and tricked the naive green-haired girl into siding with her. The little white-haired girl buying bread had no idea what was going on, but the proposal to reform all 3, masked girl, blonde, and male lead, was passed. The next day, the male lead's best friend, the cross-dressing guy, was tied to a flagpole by the golden-haired girl, who showed up with a mic. She told the male lead that to save his buddy, he had to participate in a special match she designed. Not only would she release his friend, but she'd also give him her seal, which meant he could finally leave the school. He agreed instantly. At this point, the 2 girls protested, and the golden-haired girl scolded them for abandoning their mission to reform him and turning into his lovers instead. The match's challenge was revealed: sumo wrestling. To compete, they needed to wear fundoshi belts. Since the male lead had trained in sumo since childhood, this was easy for him, but the blonde and masked girl didn't know how to wear it and had to rely on him. They didn't expect the process to be so embarrassing. The masked girl went first, enduring the shame with flushed cheeks. The blonde, horrified by the experience, begged the masked girl to help her instead, but she forgot how, and with a sly smile, asked the male lead for help. "No, not like this," she whimpered. After all the awkward preparation, the match finally began. The male lead went first, expecting a cute opponent, but was instead greeted by a giant bear named Xiong Da. Knowing it wasn't fair, the golden-haired girl said that if even one of their team beat the bear, they'd win. The match began. The male lead boldly charged head-on, launching his magic bullet attack the moment the bear swiped. The blast had enough force to knock a human out, but this was a bear. It barely made a dent. Dodging the attack, he tried another blast, still no effect. As the bear grew angry, the male lead stomped hard on its foot, knowing that the heavy paw of a standing bear was its weak spot. The bear roared in pain, giving the male lead just enough time to circle behind and lift it off the ground. Everyone thought he was about to toss it out of the ring, but at the last moment, the bear landed back on its feet and awkward silence filled the arena. But then, the bear's fundoshi he slowly slipped off, and according to Sumo rules, if your belt falls off, you lose, so the male lead still won. The golden-haired girl couldn't accept that her bear lost this way and ordered her team to prepare. She planned to face the male lead herself, and then the henchmen were ordered to block the path and deliver a harsh message. I'll be waiting on the rooftop. If you've got the guts, come fight me for it. To rescue his best friend and earn the final seal needed to leave the school, the male lead decided to face this alone, but his two harem girls couldn't sit still. They insisted they couldn't let him go into danger by himself. Though they always talked about reforming him, deep down they truly cared about his safety. They went to remove the fundoshi belts he had previously tied on them for the sumo match, but after waiting outside the changing room for a long time, he saw no sign of them. It turned out he had tied the belts too tightly, and the girls couldn't untie them. They asked how to remove them, and the male lead, ever the impulsive one, pushed open the door and walked into the changing room, only to get beaten up and thrown out. After that, the three of them discussed how to sneak past the guards and reach the rooftop. While they were strategizing, the green-haired guy had already cleared a path for them, but claimed he hated the male lead and was only doing this for the school's sake. He couldn't let the golden-haired girl keep causing chaos. The three girls also rescued the male lead's best friend from being tied up by the golden girl. Once they reached the rooftop, the blonde girl blocked the stairwell to stop the henchmen, while the male lead and the masked girl stayed behind to fight the golden-haired girl and her pet bear. The male lead immediately went to face the bear one-on-one, thinking it would be slow and easy to dodge, but he got slapped in the face, realizing this bear was a trained boxer. As he fought the bear fiercely, the masked girl clashed with the golden-haired girl, who wasn't easy to handle either. With swift, unpredictable moves, the golden girl quickly injured the masked girl. Meanwhile, the male lead found himself cornered. His magic bullet skill was effective on people, but nearly useless on this beast. Still, he wasn't worried. After so many hits, there was no way the bear was unharmed. He charged up for a powerful move, and the frightened bear instinctively covered its belly, giving the male lead a perfect opening. He struck the bear's head with a massive punch, finally knocking it down. On the other side, the masked girl also beat the golden-haired girl with a reckless fighting style, ending the rooftop battle. As the crowd cheered, the male lead wanted to fit the blonde girl and her lackeys with fundoshi belts, thinking it was only fair revenge for his harem girls. But this set off their jealousy. They thought he was just taking the chance to get handsy and tried to reform him again. After defeating the bear, the male lead became a legend across the school. Everything he did, every smile he gave, caught everyone's attention. Wherever he went, whispers followed, but his two harem girls weren't happy. They wore gloomy expressions, and the male lead was helpless about how popular he had become. At lunchtime, hoping for some peace, he tried to eat quietly, but the jealous masked girl and blonde girl showed up, both visibly annoyed. He grumbled about how hard it was to be nice. The harem girls were furious, saying he took advantage and then played the victim. It was infuriating. It turned out they were upset because the masked girl had worn a new uniform and the blonde had tried a new perfume, hoping to impress him, but he hadn't even noticed, which made them feel sad and unappreciated. From a distance, the golden-haired girl observed and commented that these two were already hopelessly deep into their feelings. But she was shocked to discover that even her beloved bear had developed feelings for the male lead. That night, the two harem girls grew angrier. The entire school's girls surrounded him all day, and he didn't even notice their efforts. So they decided to reform him again. After lunch, the male lead, feeling sleepy, went straight to bed, but someone quietly opened his door. The next day, he was full of energy and waited for the two girls outside. He noticed the masked girl had returned to her old uniform, and the blonde girl had gone back to her usual perfume, so he complimented them, saying this was their best look. Both girls blushed instantly, but while checking his belongings, the masked girl found a photo that turned her expression dark. The blonde girl, curious, took a look and blushed too, then both of them erupted in anger. It was a door photo from a girls' school exam. The male lead ran back into the building, nearly getting caught, but was saved by the golden-haired girl and her bear. Afterward, he thanked them, and the bear even confessed its love for him. He then told them what happened, and the golden-haired girl saw through the plan. Someone was trying to create a rift between the male lead and his harem before taking him out. That's when the male lead recalled a crucial detail. During that incident, he had been half asleep and had no reaction at all, so he couldn't have done anything. If he could get the original photo from the green-haired guy and show it to his harem, the misunderstanding would be cleared. The golden-haired girl praised his thinking, and the male lead decided to sneak into the girl's dorm to get evidence, but he got caught by his harem and was brutally beaten and tied up. Still, he stayed tough. He didn't explain, didn't beg, and just endured until they got tired and left. Then the golden-haired girl entered. It was all part of a plan between her and the male lead. She untied him and they sneaked into the green-haired guy's room. He wasn't there, and the golden girl guessed he was probably taking a bath. As they moved to find him, the harem girls passed by, and the male lead got cornered by the bear, who stood in front of him. Maybe because they were too close, his background started acting up, and the bear, overwhelmed, fainted. Just when it seemed they'd be discovered, the golden-haired girl sat on the bear to hide the male lead. What was that? That sounded like a guy's voice. After some chaos, they finally reached the bathroom, but even after searching, they found no sign of the green-haired guy or the photo. Then came a masked girl, one of Green Hair's Hair's closest allies. At that moment, the bathroom door opened, revealing the very person who framed the male lead. To prove his innocence, the male lead and golden-haired girl prepared to battle him and take the original photo. They confronted him and his underlings, and the male lead demanded the truth. It turned out, with help from a cross-dressing guy, the green-haired one had sneaked into the male lead's dorm and drugged him, then took the photo of the door to frame him. Meanwhile, the two harem girls were still clueless. Back with the male lead, the golden-haired girl handed one of the masked girl henchmen over to him, and the male lead was told to handle the green-haired guy. And here came the problem. Green hair was way too honest. The male lead warned him, "Jiajia, you better be careful." But the guy just shrugged it off, saying it didn't matter and it's not like he'd lose a piece of meat. But the male lead, being a youthful teenage boy, couldn't quite suppress his reaction. And just then, the golden-haired girl gave a divine assist and kicked him inside, saying, "This is the real training." As she turned around, her vision blurred. Turns out, the masked girl's poison needle had earlier pricked her, and now the effect had kicked in. No wonder the bear had fainted earlier. But the proud golden girl wasn't one to give in. She immediately stabbed her own thigh with a sharp blade, scaring everyone, showing how ruthless she could be. Meanwhile, the male lead's fight was something better left undescribed. He was just constantly getting beaten. He couldn't concentrate at all, didn't know where to look first, and green hair launched him flying and attacked his kidneys. On the other side, the golden-haired girl's battle was also intense. Doing nothing, she began dozing off again, wasting her earlier effort. Then the masked girl ambushed her, breaking her hand and coating her wound with poison. Though sleepy, the golden-haired girl refused to give up. She couldn't fall here. She picked up her sword and slashed herself again. The masked girl, shocked, exclaimed they hadn't even started fighting, yet she had already cut herself twice. Truly a madwoman. Back to the male lead, he finally realized that to fight someone shameless, you needed to be shameless too. So without hesitation, he showed off his 8-pack abs. Greenhair's eyes had nowhere to rest. After all, he too was a person of taste. The male lead seized the moment and pinned him down. Meanwhile, the golden-haired girl and the masked girl finally clashed blades, and though she was at her limit, the golden-haired girl created an opening with a hilt strike, dropped her blade, and the masked girl retaliated, only to be grabbed tightly. Even with no strength left, she used softness to counter force, throwing the masked girl to the ground and even into the air. Completely absurd. Back to the male lead, he defeated Greenhair, and with that, Greenhair was also conquered. To keep things modest, let's not describe the screen too much, but the atmosphere was undeniably charged. The male lead, Nakun, woke up naked and dazed, with Greenhair and the bear beside him. He was confused. Why was he naked, and why were there so many suction marks? Greenhair calmly explained everything. To prove his innocence, the male lead had stormed the bathroom with the golden-haired girl to defeat Greenhair and retrieve the original photo. Through the power of his abs and his, little village, he narrowly won the fight and took the opportunity to conquer Greenhair too. As Greenhair reminisced over the village, a noise came from the bathroom. Whitehair and others had rushed over, and the scene was a total mess. Whitehair Loli could hear that someone was still inside and sent others away to investigate alone. Greenhair held the male lead underwater, covering him with their body. Though Greenhair claimed to be alone, Whitehair sensed his presence and demanded Greenhair step aside. Still trying to protect him, Greenhair refused. Whitehair backed off but told the male lead to meet her at the school's pool light. As the male lead tried to peel off Greenhair's clinging body, he could barely breathe. He wanted to go challenge Whitehair immediately, but Greenhair warned him he wasn't strong enough and couldn't even move, and just as they said that, he collapsed. The earlier torture from his harem, followed by the intense fight with Greenhair, had drained all his energy. He woke up later in the infirmary, lying beside the golden-haired girl who was sound asleep. Meanwhile, the two harem girls were still upset about the photo, but were too proud to admit they had come to check on him. So, they started a silent contest of patience, drinking tea and juice non-stop, waiting for the other to give in first. Just then, Greenhair showed up and revealed the truth, that the whole photo scandal was her own scheme, and the male lead had done nothing wrong. Cut to poor Whitehair, who had waited in vain for the male lead and had even come down with a fever. Back to the male lead, just awakened, and his concern immediately turned to the newly conquered harem girl's injuries. Greenhair joked she couldn't hear well, he had broken her left eardrum, but more importantly, the photo incident was now resolved. The male lead joked that if the masked girl heard that, she might write it down in a notebook. The poor girl bowed 90 degrees and sincerely apologized, but the male lead hadn't had time to put on pants yet after treatment. So, as she raised her head, she was greeted with an unexpected full view. The pure-hearted masked girl had never seen such a scene and was about to explode in rage, but managed to calm herself, realizing that since the male lead was in the infirmary, she too was partially responsible. Being straightforward, the masked girl wanted to make up for her earlier misunderstanding and harsh beating, so she got bold. Though this plot was starting to feel a bit off, naturally, the male lead wasn't going to let her off the hook. He told her to close her eyes. She obeyed, heart pounding, lips puckered, expecting something sweet, but the male lead only took off her mask, leaving the girl utterly disappointed. "What was I thinking falling for such a blockhead?" The male lead asked why she wore the mask when her face was so lovely, the masked girl opened up. When she was young, her father cheated and abandoned the family, and her mother blamed her for it, forcing her to wear a mask. She herself believed that wearing it was a form of redemption for her father's sins. She had never truly moved on. As they poured their hearts out, the golden-haired girl in the room was suffering. She couldn't hold it anymore, nearly wetting the bed, but didn't want to ruin their heartfelt moment. She clenched her legs tightly, on the verge of turning her flower wine into a sprinkler. The male lead returned the mask and told the girl she didn't have to force herself. When she was truly ready, she could remove it on her own. He then opened up about his own past, an orphan, whose parents' faces and names he no longer remembered. The person who adopted him was a sword fanatic and subjected him to harsh training every single day. As their conversation deepened, the understanding bear brought the golden-haired girl a bucket, but even that couldn't hide the noise. Just when the moment was about to turn romantic, the blonde girl appeared, direct and furious, especially about having tied the male lead up and whipped him. About what happened that day, I am truly sorry, so please get your revenge on me as much as you want. Or, looking at this poor little golden-haired girl, she really can't hold it anymore. Afterward, the male lead returned to his dorm where the cross-dressing guy took the initiative to apologize, admitting that if he hadn't drugged the male lead, green hair would never have succeeded. But the male lead didn't blame his buddy at all, knowing he only did it to protect the boy's dorm. The cross-dresser said, "I've already washed your pillowcase," and when the male lead touched his pillow, he found the permit for going out, needing just one last stamp. The academy's most beautiful cross-dressing guy was now in the shower, and just listen to that seductive voice. Have the transformations at this girl's school been too successful? You'd heard four wives. But the last and hardest was the adorable little white-haired girl, whose power was the peak of the academy, comparable to the legendary Black Silk Whitehead. Suddenly, the masked girl told the male lead that things had been disappearing from the girl's dorm. First, the blonde's little sister's wig, then even Bear Treasure's little bear vanished, decided to widen the search. At the same time, the blonde girl asked the male lead for help, since her little sister's wig, which was basically her essence, was missing, so now she couldn't show her face. In their search, they bumped into Golden Hair. At first, Blonde thought Golden was helping her look for the wig, but when they finally talked, they realized both the bear and the wig were missing. Hearing this, the male lead noticed a flaw in their story, and the two cross-dressers started to get twitchy again. But no one expected the real peeper to show up. The male lead scrambled for their things. The peeper was thrown out along with the stolen goods. Out came Bear Treasure with blonde wig in tow, and every time she saw their secret photos together, she felt overwhelming happiness, skipping and bouncing about until her older sister arrived, followed by to put her foot down. "You're getting way too bold, new girl. Those selfies should be for you alone, not spread all over campus. Are you trying to claim the school for yourself?" In an instant, she shredded the photos, and a battle for the throne was about to explode. Meanwhile, Golden Hair discovered their plotting, and Green Hair pleaded, "I don't want to fight anymore, I promise I'll be." It didn't even pierce the skin, and even when Green Hair counterattacked, she couldn't even tear the Empress's stockings. "Foolish flower wine, with that skinny little body of yours, you can't take anything. I'll have the main character all to myself." Meanwhile, the clueless male lead was wandering about when he spotted the lone white-haired girl and decided to ask for the final stamp. The cross-dressing uncle turned pale at the sight of her. This was none other than, before he could say a word, the male lead walked up, and if she hadn't shown mercy, he'd already be dead. The male lead jumped back in terror. This little loli was too ferocious. There was no way to win her over. He'd rather keep his life than go after this cute wife. As he hesitated, the little loli actually smiled. Turns out it was all part of her act, and she suddenly became a devoted fangirl. "Not that I want to play with you or anything. It's the principal's order. I don't care that you broke into the girls' dorm or the showers, but you did stand me up one night and made me wait in the cold until I got sick. You have to take responsibility for that." After learning the truth, the male lead tried to reason with her, but just then, a butterfly flew past and immediately dropped dead. He was shocked. The butterfly was innocent. How can someone so cute be so deadly? The white-haired girl explained that the sound of its wings was too loud, and in fact, she was blind, but her hearing was incredible. Through two sword swings, the male lead recognized her invisible demon sword, an attack the naked eye couldn't see. Meanwhile, on the rooftop, the Empress was battling Golden Hair, and Bear Treasure wanted to help, so the Empress raised a single hand and easily blocked the attack, saying, "Hit me all you want, but don't you dare ruin my sexy high heels," before unleashing a few smooth and deadly combos, instantly overwhelming the bear, who couldn't hold up and was knocked unconscious. Facing the Empress's overwhelming power, everyone else stood on a unified front, but even a surprise attack from the bespectacled one didn't faze her. He ended up injured by her automatic counterattack instead. The two girls shouted about killing the Empress, but they weren't even close to being her match. The next moment, both of them were clutching their waists in agony. While the fierce rooftop battle raged on, the Empress kept casually chatting, possibly with her own secret thoughts, until she suddenly realized the male lead had vanished. Even though Little White Cat was already leaning toward willingly giving in, seeing her fellow harem members being beaten on the rooftop made the male lead rush over at full speed. Little White Cat was extremely annoyed. How could she, so adorable, be completely ignored? So she took out her frustration on the cross-dressing brute. By the time the male lead arrived on the rooftop, he was met with a tragic scene. His comrades were badly injured, and the Empress was nowhere to be seen. Seeing Gold Hair gravely wounded, wounded, brought a flood of memories, and the male lead could no longer suppress his burning fury. Meanwhile, the Empress descended into the courtyard, declaring that she would defeat all the other harem girls to prove that she alone was worthy of being the male lead's true queen. Mask Girl and Gold Hair immediately charged at her, and even facing a joint attack from the Five Swords, the Empress used a single technique, double-handed ball spin, to knock them down effortlessly. Her karate was at its peak. Her body, trained to its limits, automatically countered any attack. The remaining two girls trembled on the sidelines. As the strongest of the Five Swords, Little White Hair stepped forward, shyly asking Pink Hair, "Are we friends?" Pink Hair was stunned. Why ask something like that now? But Little White Hair needed a reason to intervene, and now that she had one, she formally offered her friendship and stepped into battle. It was to be the ultimate showdown between the strongest swordswoman and the strongest martial artist. White Hair placed her blade at her waist, and the moment she opened her eyes, killing intent surged out. Everyone around held their breath, stunned by the aura of these two titans. It was like a lion versus a bunny. White Hair moved at incredible speed, leaving after images as she slashed 3 times at the Empress's chest in an instant. The blow finally caused damage to the Empress, and just as everyone cheered, something unexpected happened. White Hair had also been wounded. Her weapon wasn't strong enough, and she herself was weakened by fever, unable to fight at full strength. Just as she prepared for a desperate final strike, the male lead appeared behind her. This was the start of the final battle. It turned out the Empress and the male lead had once attended the same school. His carefree and playful attitude had brought a light into her once dark life. He was her first true friend, someone who opened her closed-off heart. But the Empress didn't expect his warmth to be shared with others. When he rejected her invitation in favor of someone else, she coldly declared that only those worthy should date the strong. Their clashing ideals turned them into enemies. Now, as the Empress charged forward, the male lead pushed the little lowly aside and launched a punch, but was countered instantly and knocked to the ground. Fortunately, his notebook absorbed the hit, and he wasn't hurt. Seeing him risk his life to protect her, White Hair blushed and asked, "Did you do that because you want to pursue me?" But the male lead clearly didn't have that intention. White Hair pouted, saying, "I'm not some girl who throws herself at guys. With that attitude, I wouldn't want you anyway." Then she remembered they still had to fight. The male lead took a fighting stance, and his harem girls whispered about his hidden technique and how powerful it was. The Empress taunted him to pounce like a beast, and as he charged forward, she activated her technique, double-handed ball spin, injuring his arm and tearing his clothes. As he attacked again, she elbowed him hard and grabbed his head, thrusting her palm toward his chest. He wriggled free, sacrificing his shirt in the process. The Empress threw his shirt aside and used it to blind him, but White Hair saw through everything and told him, "The Empress is a woman too. Didn't she just tell you to pounce like a beast?" The male lead suddenly understood. He loosened his tie and revealed his 8-pack abs. The Empress was instantly captivated. Looking at the man to finish him off, she couldn't bring herself to do it. Her tear-filled eyes revealed deep sorrow. Light rain began to fall, like the sadness in her heart. Unable to have, she almost knocked him out. Encouraged by the cries of his harem girls, he stood up again and fired another magic bullet into her stomach. Though he was also stabbed in return, their mutual injuries started to dissolve the walls between them. The Empress finally accepted him again, clutching him tightly, saying, "Now you understand how I feel." Because in love, even the strongest lose once they fall first. The skies cleared. "We were trained in the same school. You looked like a bear toy out there. She let you win. That was embarrassing." She said he needed proper training and scolded, "She's my junior sister and you want to take advantage of her?" Then quite suddenly, White Hair revealed the final permission stamp. "If you want it, I'm willing to give it," she said. With this, the male lead had collected all 5 seals and could finally leave. 3 masked girls appeared, preparing to finish off the Empress, but a mustached man arrived to stop them. The person who came was the school principal. Suddenly pointed at the male lead, and that night, the male lead looked at his permit with a heavy heart. The next day, he went to visit his wives, and upon hearing that he might be expelled, after all, she was someone he had shared physical intimacy with, and he couldn't bear to let go. Zuoniao asked him about the incident at the bathhouse. "The me you mentioned, which one was it?" he replied. On his way back, he encountered White Hair. It clearly wasn't a coincidence. She told him that the Empress was preparing to leave, and if he wanted to say goodbye at the airport, he had to go now. But without the expulsion formalities completed, he still couldn't leave the school. This little white-haired lowly was young, but sharp-minded. She said, "If you agree to become my disciple, I'll give you the stamp to leave school." Meanwhile, the Empress kept turning back with every step she took, and Nak Village arrived at the airport just in time. Even then, he couldn't resist teasing, "Thanks to you, I've now become White Hair's disciple. Should I just run away with you instead?" Tianyu knew he was joking and said, "As long as you stay true to yourself, that's enough." She walked over, reached for his tie, and in that moment, the warmth of her feelings finally came through. Tianyu confessed her love, saying, "Since the day we met, you've been deep in my heart." After the farewell, the male lead returned from the airport, and as soon as he got to the platform, he heard a familiar voice. They understood each other better. Though there was some regret, he didn't feel any remorse. Normally, the rightful main wife would stay by the male lead's side, and now that Tianyu had left, the title should go to the masked girl. But Yellow Hair wouldn't concede either, who the true main, but the principal still insisted on expelling him. Classic setup. In the end, out of respect respect for the Academy's sword arts, the school reduced the male lead's punishment but insisted both like their first encounter and asked, "Will you abandon your dignity and dress like a girl, or will you leave the school? Choose one." Wow, Aichi Education Academy, my baby, I'm back. This male lead was really living the dream. Despite failing his exams, his harem immediately offered to tutor him. There was a stunning English teacher, an adorable little loli, and every type of girl you could want. And that was just the 5 shown on the surface, because really, the whole school was his harem. That day, the school organized a hot spring trip for the 5 swords, but there was one extra slot. The students speculated about who would be chosen, but the cross-dressing macho guy already had a guess. Isn't it obvious? Knack Village. The 4 harem girls were awkwardly trying to figure out who should get that last ticket. The masked girl was panicking. It had to be the male lead. Yellow hair felt the same way, imagining all sorts of steamy developments, but neither wanted to be the one to say it out loud, afraid of seeming too eager. So yellow hair tried to get the masked girl to say it, while the masked girl tried to make yellow hair say it instead. Meanwhile, a group of underclassmen who had the older girls already had someone in mind. Such fragile sisterhood. The masked girl was sweating nervously, struggling to speak up about wanting to bring the male lead. Elsewhere, white hair had been waiting by the pool for him to stop tapping. She decided to give him a lesson in sword dance instead. She gracefully rose, the camera's own special techniques to blast him away. He shouted, "I've been fighting every day lately. I've already been through 12 boss battles in this 13-episode arc. My body can't take it anymore." Meanwhile, the 4 girls continued their debate. Just as things reached a deadlock, white hair walked in and bluntly declared she would take the male lead with her. Everyone was relieved. The younger girls, seeing that their savior had been chosen, couldn't say much. So with white hair's help, the male lead got a free pass to the hot spring trip. Just when he was about to start their date, they were interrupted. The principal, who had been listening from the sidelines all along, objected. He said the male lead had failed his exams and had to take makeup tests, but that wasn't a problem. Don't be fooled by how these 5 harem girls never seemed to study. They were all secretly academic overachievers. Just look at those well-rounded personalities. Each took responsibility for tutoring him in a different subject, and they all wanted one-on-one time. So of course, a fight broke out. Everyone wanted to tutor him first. Meanwhile, green hair had already moved into action. Judging from the male lead's overwhelmed expression, their tutoring order was determined by academic rank, and when compared, it was absurd. Every one of them had perfect scores. By the time they came to their senses, the male lead was already gone. Frantic, they stormed the boys' dormitory, eager to give him their lessons, only to be crushed by what they saw next. The cross-dressing macho guy was already tutoring the male lead, having become the quiet, devoted woman in the background. This male lead was living the ultimate fantasy. The male lead went to a hot spring inn with 5 beautiful girls, each one stunning, ranging from cool, mature big sisters to adorable lolis. And all of them wanted to help him scrub his back, and honestly, all I can say is, bro, brace yourself. Because the male lead had successfully passed his makeup exams, the girls fulfilled their promise and brought him on the "Don't look at me like that, I've got 5 or 6 more years before I'm fully safe. I'm dead," the male lead muttered. That evening, the girls changed into Enter It would have their wish come true. Gold hair scoffed, "What kind of nonsense is that?" Blonde hair chimed in, "It's modern times, who still believes in that kind of fairy tale?" But then, silence fell. The air out, the others unleashed their skills. The battlefield of love had begun. No one got slashed, but unexpectedly, the masked girl had quite the figure. Thank you, nature. While distracted, gold hair was taken down by a stylish sword combo. Realizing that being the first to the hot spring was the smart move, she dashed away. Green hair wasn't about to lose. She stripped down and sprinted, moving so fast she even dropped a precious sword artifact. Gold hair went full speed too, going no armor mode as they rushed neck and neck into the hot spring. Just as gold hair dove in cheering, green hair struck her down with a single slash. That's the benefit of bathing with your sword. Then white hair strolled in casually and said, "There are 2 hot springs, you know. Just use the warning." Got launched like a meteor. Meanwhile, the girls soaked and chatted in the bath when suddenly, the male lead fell straight from the sky into the spring, as expected from a man with maxed out white hair.